What I want to talk about is the urgency of climate change. Why do we need to act now as a society? Why is it this generation, this moment in time? Is there really urgency with climate change? So what I want to start with is just a little bit of my own personal story and weave that into some of the things that the City of Edmonton is doing. So here I flash before you a date, 1991. This date is an important date in my own journey. And oddly enough, it coincides with a very important date here in Alberta, some of the initial actions that Alberta took as well. With respect to climate change, I wonder if everybody needs their aha moment, because I certainly had my aha moment. It was in 1991. I was in my second year of college, and you're like, no, he looks way too young. There's no way he was in college in 91. And I was actually majoring in broadcast journalism. Obviously, I took another turn after that, too, but I went into the sciences very soon after that. But I took an elective class because one of my journalism profs told me that environment was a really hot-button issue, and every journalist needed to have some exposure to it. So I registered in Natural Sciences 1112. It was global environmental issues. And we actually talked about two main things in that course. One was the hole in the ozone layer, and the other one was global warming. So with respect to ozone response, this was our case study in everything that could go right with respect to international environmental cooperation. Science identified an issue, the international community rallied, policymakers stood up and noticed, and the world came together and said, we gotta fix this. We need to change a lot about the things that we do. And just 5 years prior, 197 countries signed on to the Montreal Protocol. And if you're not familiar with that, I'd be surprised because it actually is one of the biggest success stories in environmental action, global environmental action ever. It's often been touted as the main success story when it comes to global cooperation. And it was the first universally ratified protocol by the United Nations. And it actually has worked. The ozone layer is on its way to healing. There's about 30 years to go, they say, before it totally closes, but we have started to address that issue. And then we start to talk about global warming, too. And of course, as students, we got off this very positive experience with the ozone layer response. We said, you know, we're living in this world of international success stories right now, and maybe we could be a part of addressing climate change. And you know, surprising enough, in 1991, when I was taking this course, the Alberta government actually released its first climate change action plan. It was called the Clean Air Strategy for Alberta. It integrated criteria air contaminants with climate change. And it was actually a very good document. I encourage you to take a look at it if you can find it online. This is what it looks like, though, so you probably can only find it in a library. What library, I don't know, but government library. But Alberta decided to actually follow, in this document, Canada's commitment to stabilize emissions at 1990 levels by the year 2000. So modeling in 1991 suggested that a doubling of CO2 would lead to Alberta being, on average, 3 to 7 degrees warmer by 2100. And so again, as students, we thought we were in this monumental era of international environmental stewardship. So I thought, this is great, we're gonna fix this thing. But it turns out, you know, we didn't. And that's because the issue was actually way more complex, more expensive, more integrated into the very underpinnings of our economy than anyone ever thought. So progress was pretty slow, and I think part of that slow progress is because the urgency wasn't necessarily there. So is it urgent now? So why is it our generation's problem? Where are we almost 30 years after this plan came out? Well, carbon dioxide went from about 355 parts per million to 403 parts per million. So not only have we exceeded levels not seen in 800,000 years, but last year was the largest jump since the international community began directly measuring CO2. And Edmonton's temperature has increased over 2 degrees Celsius on average, and even warmer increases in the winter with a 4 degrees average increase. These are some numbers of modeling that's happened going into the future. And so we've increased 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, and by 2080, it's expected to be an 8 degrees Celsius increase. And with the international agreement, the Paris Agreement, we're talking about maintaining a global average increase of 2 degrees Celsius. So in the northern latitudes, we are already seeing that. We're already there. So again, some more modeling that's been done by some smart people at an organization called C40. What they're suggesting is there's a carbon budget. So there's only a certain amount of emissions we can all put into the environment. And they're saying in an urban environment, there's about an average of 5.1 tons per person that needs to be decreased to about 2.9 tons per person by 2030 in order to address climate change, and actually 0 tons per person by 2050. So where are we here in Edmonton? Well, in 2016, the entire community emitted 17.3 million tons of CO2. That works out to be about 19.2 tons per person. So that's about 4 times the global average and 6 times the goal that we need to achieve by 2030. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And the good thing is that science says it's urgent, but we're getting indications that Edmontonians think it's urgent. And look at the turnout tonight. Great turnout, and our surveying suggesting, people are saying this is something we got to act on as a community. We got to do something about it. And the City of Edmonton is doing things. We're actually acting. We've got a unanimously supported climate change action plan called our Energy Transition Plan that Council passed in 2015. We have programs around getting a home evaluation and energy labeling with a $400 rebate that's available right now for you to find out your own personalized roadmap to energy efficiency in your home. We're working on financing mechanisms to help people invest in their homes, invest in their buildings, and improve the energy efficiency of those buildings. We, of course, have the Blatchford development, where it's a low-carbon community for 30,000 people. We did something that's really incredible, I think, and hats off to City Council on this one, is 1% of the capital budget starting in 2019 for our buildings is going to be allocated to on-site renewable energy. It's really an amazing thing. It models a very successful program, the Public Arts program. And of course, sustainable transportation, which Anna, who's our next speaker, is going to talk about a lot with the bike lanes. We're also committing at the City of Edmonton to electrify the public transit system and buses. And the Change for Climate program is a program that helps residents actually understand what actions they can take and the impact of those actions will have on the emissions here in Edmonton. So that's why we're here today. We're launching our Change for Climate program. I encourage you to go to the changeforclimate.ca website and sign up and talk about what actions you're willing to take and understand your own carbon footprint and some of the things that you can do to reduce that carbon footprint. Thank you very much.